Indeed. I move that this bill be read a second time. Thank you, Deputy President. A few short weeks ago, I, with I think all my Greens colleagues across the country, joined thousands of people, and I joined 300,000 people to walk across the Harbour Bridge in an historic march for a free Palestine and an end to genocide. And in that moment, I saw solidarity and possibility for a better world. I saw people of all ages, all abilities, all backgrounds, uniting together in the driving rain to stand up for conscience and to end the suffering of the people of Gaza. But where I saw solidarity and possibility, where I saw hope, and I saw my beautiful hometown of Sydney come together for peace and for humanity, the New South Wales Labor Party just saw a problem. Like too many state and territory governments, New South Wales Labor sees protest not as a fundamental part of our democracy, not as a human right, not as the most powerful tool for driving progress in societies. They saw the protest as an irritant, as a political problem. They would have far rathered we did not march. They would have liked Sydney-siders to stay at home and watch their Netflix and passively let the governments fail to oppose a genocide. They would have rathered our voices not be heard. They want to keep power in the walls of Parliament, in the offices of police commissioners they appoint, and they desperately want to stop power being exercised in our streets, in our workplaces, and as we come together of people of good conscience who care about the future. And I have to tell you, Deputy President, the right to protest is under assault in states and territories across the country. And that is having real impacts on our democracy and our collective ability to come together, to demand changes, to end unjust laws, to protect nature, to stand up for decency. The environment and justice movements are increasingly under threat of legal sanctions and arrests for acts of non-violent resistance to the extractive industries, especially logging and fossil fuels. And here I want to place on record my party's gratitude to those forest defenders who are in tripods protecting old-growth forests as the bulldozers are coming. I want to express our solidarity and gratitude to those First Nations elders who we know, when they step out on the streets with us, face the real threat of police violence and arrest in a way that many of us don't, because we have a different privilege when we walk and exercise our rights to protest. So I want to thank those hundreds of thousands of my fellow Sydney-siders who walked beside Australian Palestinians, Australians from across society who crossed that bridge for justice. And I want to make sure that they are not arrested for the act of showing their dissent and standing up for a better world. And so today we push back on this, and we say clearly we will protect protest, and we will keep marching and striking and sitting in and locking on, and we'll defend those who take actions on behalf of our environment, to defend human rights, to protect nature and hold on to what they believe in. And we do this because now more than ever, the future demands bravery right now from all of us. Protesters must not be met with repression, with batons, with capsicum spray, with horses, with police violence, long prison sentences for the act of peaceful dissent. And Australian politicians, including in this place, where you can just smell the hypocrisy rise time after time, are quick to condemn other nations who criminalise and attack peaceful protests. I've heard it myself. You know, within 24 hours, we'll get a member of the Labor Party or the Coalition attacking some other country because of their laws criminalising protests or their police brutality, and then at the next moment back in their own state and territory governments when they are passing new laws to police protests and prevent people coming out and exercising their right to dissent. And while politicians in this place are quick to condemn those other nations, under our very noses, state and territory governments across Australia have been chipping away at, no, not just in fact chipping away at, axing away at this fundamental right. I've been arrested under unfair protest laws when I stood between row upon row of riot police, puffed up like highly armed turkeys, puffing their chest out, and school students who were protesting against a climate disaster. And at that time, Sydney was surrounded by fire. Ash was falling from the skies across our city. And those students were outside the then Prime Minister's Kirribilli place while he was off holidaying in Hawaii. Our country was burning. Ash was falling from the sky. Students were in a cul-de-sac in front of an empty house because the Prime Minister was on a holiday in Hawaii, and the police sent the riot protesters in to move them and clear them from the roadway because they said they were blocking the cul-de-sac in front of an empty house with an absent Prime Minister. And what were those students doing? School kids mainly. They were calling for action on climate. And the New South Wales Police used anti-protest laws, used move-on orders to stop the students from blocking the cul-de-sac in front of the PM's empty home, and they arrested people, one after the other, including myself. And as that expensive and failed police farce played out, and they took it to court and they were hosed out, I saw the system close up. It's nothing to do with public safety, nothing to do with national security. It wasn't to open an empty cul-de-sac to an empty house. It was being used by the rich and powerful to avoid accountability. And we know that these laws are mostly used against young people, and especially First Nations communities, who are resisting damage to their land and their water and our collective future. Young protesters standing up for the right to a livable planet are being hit with criminal penalties, while the owners of the corporations that pollute our water, destroy our land, damage sacred sites, mortgage those young people's futures, are they being green-lighted by this place and by state and territory governments, and even subsidised by governments for the damage they cause. This bill is an attempt to rebalance the scales towards justice. This bill operates by clearly defining the right to peaceful protest as a federally protected right, drawing on long-standing international precedent in the International Convention on Civil and Political Rights. It establishes that a person, a human being, has the right to engage in peaceful protests in a public place, and that any restrictions on that right must be justified in accordance with principles necessary in a democratic society. We legislate, finally, for the right to protest enshrined in the International Convention on Civil and Political Rights. And the Right to Protest Bill affirms that all Australians have the right to engage in peaceful protest in public spaces, and that any restrictions on that right must be strictly limited to those necessary for national security, for public safety, public order, public health or the rights of others, and they must be proportionate. And that includes the excessive penalties that have been passed by the New South Wales government, the Victorian government and the Tasmanian government, to name some. There are no exemptions for the feelings of state premiers who would really rather that you didn't speak up, rather you stayed behind. And the bill ensures that excessive penalties, such as lengthy prison sentences and exorbitant fines, are considered unnecessary and disproportionate limitations on the right to protest, and it reads them down. The bill provides that where state or territory laws conflict with this federal protection, that those laws will be invalid, and they'll be invalid to the extent of the inconsistency. Deputy President, this bill is an essential reset, and some might criticise it as being too reasonable, too proportionate a protection of the fundamental right to protest. And I'll face those criticisms. But what we're doing here today is placing the protections that the federal government agreed to when it entered into these international agreements. We're placing those protections into domestic law. And I want to place on the record one person who was critical for me, my office and my team, and I want to do a shout-out to my Chief of Staff, Kim Chappell, for the enormous work she's done on this. I want to point out one person who was critical for getting this work done, and it was former Greens leader Bob Brown. And I've got to say, some 18 months ago, caught up with Bob in Hobart, and Bob and the Tasmanian Greens and countless forest protectors down in Tasmania have been putting themselves on the line to protect that old-growth forest. And they have seen firsthand how those state laws in Tasmania were designed to criminalise the very act of protecting a forest, the very act of standing up for those beautiful, beautiful natural assets, arresting protesters, grabbing them even before they get to the forest on public land. And I want to thank him for his courage, and I want to thank him for his support and his pressure in bringing this bill to the chamber today. And, Deputy President, we call on all parties in this place who live and breathe only because we have a functioning democracy to join us today to legislate for the right to peaceful and essential protest. And I commend the bill to the Senate.